Well, hello there. Come on in. Sit down at this table with me. I am going to tell you about something that might make your mouth water and your heart ache all at the same time. I'm talking about the food we used to eat, the real food, the kind of meals that filled your belly and your soul, that brought families together, that made a house smell like home. I'm 76 years old, and I've been thinking a lot lately about the flavors we've lost, the recipes that died with our mothers and grandmothers, the meals that you just can't find anymore, no matter how hard you look. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, real coffee, not that fancy latte nonsense, and let me take you on a journey through the tastes of yesterday. You know what I miss most? Sunday pot roast. Not the kind you see in restaurants now, all fancy with reduction sauces and microgreens, whatever those are. I'm talking about the pot roast my mother made every single Sunday without fail from the time I was born until the day she couldn't stand at the stove anymore. She'd get up early, before anyone else in the house was awake, and she'd start that roast. A big chuck roast. Probably cost her $2 at the butcher. And she'd de-brown it in her cast-iron Dutch oven, the same one her mother had given her, the same one that's sitting in my kitchen right now, though I don't use it as much as I should. She'd brown that meat until it had a crust on it, dark and caramelized, and the smell would wake up the whole house. Not an alarm clock, not a radio. The smell of beef browning in butter was our Sunday morning alarm. Then she'd add the vegetables, carrots, potatoes, onions. Not fancy heirloom varieties, not organic this, or locally sourced that. Just regular vegetables from the A&P, cut into big chunks because they were going to cook for hours. She'd pour in beef stock, homemade, kept in jars in the icebox. Made from the bones she'd saved all week. Add a bay leaf, some thyme from the garden, salt and pepper. That's it. 5, 6 ingredients total. Then into the oven it went, and for the next 4 hours, our house would smell like heaven. We'd go to church, Episcopal, every Sunday, no exceptions, and the whole time Reverend Patterson was preaching, I'd be thinking about that pot roast waiting at home. We weren't bad Christians, we just had our priorities straight. We'd come home around noon, and Mom would pull that Dutch oven out of the oven. The meat would be so tender it fell apart when you looked at it. The vegetables had absorbed all that beefy goodness. The gravy, oh Lord, the gravy, was thick and rich and glossy. A kind of gravy you wanted to drink from a cup. We'd sit down at the dining room table. All of us, Mom, Dad, me, my 2 sisters, and often my grandmother, who lived just down the street. Dad would carve the meat. Mom would serve the vegetables, and we'd eat in comfortable silence, broken only by the clinking of forks and knives and the occasional, "Pass the gravy, please." Nobody rushed. Nobody had anywhere to be. Sunday dinner was sacred, and that pot roast was the sacrament. You can't find that anymore. Sure, restaurants serve pot roast, but it's not the same. It doesn't have that time, that patience, that love cooked into it. It doesn't have the weight of tradition, the sense that this is what we do, this is who we are. And families don't sit down together like that anymore. Everyone's too busy, too scheduled, too distracted by screens and activities and the endless rush of modern life. Something precious was lost there, and I'm not sure we can ever get it back. Let me tell you about meatloaf. Now, I know what you're thinking. Meatloaf? That boring thing we had to eat when Mom was too tired to cook something good. But you're wrong. A good meatloaf, the kind our mothers made, was a work of art. My wife, God rest her soul, she's been gone 5 years now, made the best meatloaf I've ever tasted. And I've been trying to recreate it since she passed, but it's never quite right. She had this recipe from her mother, who had it from her mother, going back who knows how far. Ground beef and ground pork mixed together, breadcrumbs soaked in milk, eggs to bind it, onions chopped fine, a little garlic, salt, pepper. And here's the secret, a splash of Worcestershire sauce and a tablespoon of yellow mustard. You mix it all together with your hands, and she'd always say, "Don't overmix it, or it'll be tough." She'd form it into a loaf in a baking pan, and then here's the crucial part. She'd decoat the top with ketchup mixed with brown sugar and a little vinegar. Not too sweet, not too tangy, just right. Into the oven it would go, and 45 minutes later you'd have this beautiful, glazed meatloaf with crispy edges and a moist, flavorful interior. She'd serve it with mashed potatoes, real mashed potatoes, boiled and mashed with butter and milk and salt. None of those instant flakes that taste like wallpaper paste and green beans from the garden in summer, or from the cans we put up in winter. Sometimes she'd make gravy from the drippings in the pan. That was Tuesday night dinner at our house for 40 years of marriage, and I never got tired of it. The leftovers, and there were always leftovers, because she'd make a big one. We'd have meatloaf sandwiches the next day. Cold meatloaf on white bread with ketchup, and maybe a slice of cheese. That was lunch, and it was perfect. But here's the thing about that meatloaf. It wasn't just food. It was Tuesday. It was routine. It was knowing what to expect, having something reliable in a world that often wasn't. It was my wife in the kitchen at 5:30, humming along to the radio while she mixed and shaped and glazed. It was the sound of the oven door closing, and knowing that in less than an hour, we'd sit down together and share a meal and talk about our days. It was the taste of home, of marriage, of a life built together one meal at a time. And now I sit here with a recipe card, yellowed and stained, her handwriting fading, and I make that meatloaf for myself sometimes. But it doesn't taste the same. It can't, because half of what made it delicious was her making it, her serving it, her sitting across from me while we ate it. Let's talk about breakfast, because breakfast was a whole different world back then. None of this grabbing a granola bar on your way out the door. None of this protein shake nonsense. Breakfast was a meal, a real sit-down meal, even on weekdays. Earlier in winter, when Dad had to be at work before dawn. And she'd make breakfast for all of us. Eggs, bacon or sausage, toast, sometimes pancakes or waffles on special mornings. The eggs were from chickens we knew. Mrs. Henderson down the street kept hens, and we'd buy eggs from her, still warm sometimes, with yolks so orange they were almost red. Mom would fry them in bacon grease, and they'd have these lacy, crispy edges and a yolk that was still runny. You'd break that yolk with your toast and let it run all over the plate, mixing with the bacon grease and the salt and pepper, and it was pure heaven. Bacon wasn't this limp microwave thing you get at hotels now. It was thick cut from the butcher, and Mom would lay it in a cold cast iron skillet and let it heat up slowly, rendering all that fat until the bacon was crispy and wavy and shattered when you bit into it. The smell of bacon frying. Is there any better smell in the world? It meant morning. It meant family. It meant life was good. Toast was made under the broiler, or in a toaster that actually toasted, not warmed, giving you corners that were almost burned, and a middle that was golden brown. Butter melted into it immediately, soaking into all those little holes in the bread. Strawberry jam in summer, made from berries we picked ourselves, or grape jelly from a jar with a gingham cover that my aunt had given us. And coffee, real coffee, percolated in a pot on the stove, strong enough to wake the dead, served in heavy ceramic mugs that kept it hot. None of these paper cups with plastic lids. None of these fancy drinks with 17 ingredients and names you can't pronounce. Just coffee, black or with cream and sugar, sitting next to your plate while you ate your eggs and bacon and talked about what needed to be done that day. Dad would read the paper, an actual newspaper, printed on actual paper, with ink that came off on your fingers, while Mom bustled around making sure everyone had enough. My sisters and I would probably have been bickering about something stupid, and Mom would tell us to hush and eat our breakfast before it got cold. That breakfast took an hour out of every morning. An hour that my mother spent cooking and serving instead of sleeping in or doing something for herself. And we all sat there together for 20 minutes at least, eating and being a family before we scattered to school and work. Do families do that anymore? I don't think so. Everyone's in too much of a hurry, too busy to sit down, too important to waste time on something as simple as breakfast together. But I'm telling you, those breakfasts were the glue that held us together. They were the daily reminder that we were a family, that we mattered to each other, that someone cared enough to get up early and cook for us. Saturday afternoons in summer, my mother would make iced tea. Now I know iced tea still exists, but it's not the same. She'd make it from scratch, boiling water on the stove, adding 6 or 7 tea bags to a big pot, letting it steep until it was dark as mahogany, almost black. Then she'd de-stir in sugar while it was still hot, and I mean a lot of sugar, probably a cup at least, until it dissolved completely. She'd pour it into a glass pitcher. We had one just for iced tea, heavy glass with a pattern of lemons etched into it, and add cold water and ice until it was full. Then it would go in the refrigerator, and by the time Dad got home from whatever project he was working on in the garage, that tea would be perfectly cold, perfectly sweet, absolutely perfect for quenching a summer thirst. She'd de-serve it in tall glasses, filled to the top with ice cubes from the metal trays in the freezer. You remember those, the ones with the lever you had to pull to break the ice loose? She'd put a sprig of mint from the garden in each glass if we had it. Not because it added much flavor, but because it looked nice, because presentation mattered, even though we were just family. We'd sit on the front porch in the late afternoon, in those metal lawn chairs that would burn the back of your legs if you sat down too fast. And we'd drink that iced tea and watch the neighborhood kids play in the street and talk about nothing important. The tea was sweet and cold and perfect, and it tasted like summer, like leisure, like a time when we weren't always rushing to the next thing. You can buy iced tea now in bottles and cans in fast food restaurants, and it all tastes like chemicals in sadness. It's either too sweet or not sweet enough, too weak or too strong, and it definitely doesn't have my mother's love mixed into it. That was the secret ingredient in all her cooking. Love, attention, care. She wasn't a gourmet chef. She didn't have fancy techniques or expensive ingredients. But she put herself into every meal she made, and you could taste it. Now let me tell you about something that I bet most of you remember, but maybe haven't thought about in years. TV dinners. I know. They were supposed to be the opposite of good home cooking, the beginning of the end of real food. But hear me out. There was something special about TV dinners in the early days, in the late 50s and early 60s, when they were new and exciting. Swanson came out with them in 1953, and by the time I was a teenager, they were everywhere. My mother, who cooked from scratch every other day of the week, would sometimes, usually on Friday nights when she was tired from a long week, buy TV dinners for us kids. We thought it was the greatest thing in the world. These aluminum trays divided into compartments, each one with a different part of the meal. Turkey with gravy in the big section, mashed potatoes in another, corn or peas in a third, and a dessert, usually apple cobbler or cherry cobbler, in the fourth. She'd deheat them in the oven, no microwaves yet, and the smell of them cooking was different from her usual cooking. More processed, but still appetizing in its own way. She'd set up TV trays in the living room, those folding trays that you stored in a rack when you weren't using them. And we'd eat dinner while watching TV, which was normally forbidden. Friday night was Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. Later, it was the Brady Bunch or Partridge Family. And we'd debalance those hot aluminum trays on our laps and eat our TV dinners and feel like we were living in the future. The turkey was pressed and processed, and not at all like real turkey, but it had its own appeal. The gravy was gloppy and too salty, but we loved it anyway. The mashed potatoes were obviously instant, but covered in that gravy. Who cared? The vegetables were mushy and overcooked. But we ate them because they were there and because Mom was watching. And that dessert, that cobbler with the crispy top and the fruit filling that was more sugar than fruit, was the prize you earned for finishing everything else. Were they good? By today's standards, probably not. By the standards of real home cooking, definitely not. But they represented something: modernity, convenience, a little bit of freedom from the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning. And for us kids, they were a treat, something different, something special about Friday nights that made the end of the school week feel celebratory. Of course, TV dinners evolved and got worse. They became more processed, more chemical, more sad. But in those early years, they were novel enough to be exciting, and they give me a strange nostalgia now when I think about them. They represent a moment in time when convenience was still new enough to be thrilling, before we realized what we'd be giving up in exchange for it. Let's talk about something truly special: Sunday morning pancakes. Not just any pancakes. My grandmother's pancakes, made from a recipe she learned from her mother, who learned it from her mother, going back generations. These were not the boxed mixed pancakes you can buy now, where you just add water and pretend you cooked something. These were from scratch: flour, eggs, milk, baking powder, a pinch of salt, a tablespoon of sugar, melted butter. Grandma would mix the batter in a big ceramic bowl, stirring it with a wooden spoon until it was just combined. Don't overmix it, she'd warn. You want it a little lumpy. That's what makes them tender. She'd heat up her griddle, a flat cast iron griddle that covered 2 burners on the stove, and test it by flicking water on it. When the water danced and sizzled, it was ready. She'd ladle the batter onto the griddle, making circles that were just the right size, not too big, not too small. You'd watch those pancakes and wait for the bubbles to appear on the top, little craters forming and popping, and when the edges looked set, Grandma would flip them with a spatula, and the cooked side would be golden brown with little darker spots, where the batter had hit the hottest parts of the griddle. Another minute on the second side, and they were done, stacked on a plate in the warming oven until she had enough for everyone. Those pancakes were light and fluffy, with a slight tang from the buttermilk, tender, but with enough structure to hold together when you cut them. Grandma would put out real butter, not margarine, which she said was 1 molecule away from plastic, and real maple syrup, the good stuff from Vermont. It cost a fortune, but was worth every penny. You'd put a pat of butter on top of your stack and watch it melt and run down the sides. Then pour the syrup over everything until it pooled on the plate. The first bite was always the best: fluffy pancakes soaked in butter and syrup, sweet and rich and satisfying. We'd sit around Grandma's dining room table, probably 8 or 10 of us, grandkids and great-grandkids and whoever else had shown up, and eat pancakes until we couldn't move. But it wasn't just about the pancakes themselves. It was about Grandma standing at that stove for an hour, making batch after batch, making sure everyone got enough, everyone got the good ones, everyone left her house full and happy. It was about the ritual of it, the tradition, the sense that this is what Sundays were for: family and food and being together. Grandma's been gone for 15 years now, and we still make her pancakes sometimes, using the same recipe written on a card in her handwriting. But they never taste quite the same, because she's not the one making them. She's not the one serving them with that smile and that insistence that you eat more. Eat more. You're too skinny. I need to tell you about church potlucks, because if you grew up in small-town America like I did, church potlucks were the absolute pinnacle of good eating. Once a month, after Sunday service, everyone would bring a dish to share, and we'd set up tables in the church basement or in the fellowship hall and lay out a feast that would make kings jealous. Every woman in that church had her specialty, the dish she was known for, the one everyone hoped she'd bring. Mrs. Patterson made a macaroni and cheese that was legendary. Elbow macaroni in a cheese sauce made from real cheddar, not from a box, baked until it was bubbly and golden on top, with a crust that was crispy and rich. Mrs. Johnson brought her famous fried chicken, soaked in buttermilk overnight. There'd be casseroles. Green bean casserole with those crispy fried onions on top. Tuna noodle casserole with potato chips crushed over it. Chicken and rice casserole. It was creamy and comforting. There'd be salads. Not these fancy mixed green salads, but substantial salads like potato salad with hard-boiled eggs and pickles, and just enough mayo. Coleslaw that was crisp and tangy. Jell-O salad. Yes, Jell-O salad, which I know people make fun of now, but it was delicious. With fruit suspended in lime or cherry Jell-O, sometimes with whipped cream or cottage cheese mixed in. There'd be rolls, homemade rolls that were soft and pillowy, still warm from the oven, with butter melting into them. There'd be deviled eggs, dozens of deviled eggs, each one slightly different depending on who made them. Some with pickle relish, some with paprika, some with a little mustard. And the desserts? Oh, the desserts. This was where the women really competed, where reputations were made. Mrs. Wilson's chocolate cake with fudge frosting, so rich and moist it was almost pudding. Mrs. Thompson's lemon meringue pie with meringue piled 6 inches high, toasted to golden brown peaks. My mother's apple pie with a lattice crust and cinnamon sugar sprinkled on top. Mrs. Garcia's flan, smooth and creamy with caramel, it was bittersweet and perfect. Cookies and brownies and bar cookies, and fruit cobblers and pound cakes and angel food cakes. The dessert table was 20 feet long and packed from end to end, and you were expected to try at least 3 or 4, because otherwise someone's feelings would be hurt. You'd go through that line with a plate, a real plate, not paper, because the church ladies wouldn't hear of serving food on paper plates, and you'd depile it, high with a little bit of everything that looked good, which was everything. You'd find a seat at one of those long tables with the folding legs, and you'd eat until you couldn't breathe. Then someone would start serving dessert, and somehow you'd find room for that too. People would visit from table to table, catching up on news, gossiping a little, laughing a lot. Kids would run around being too loud until someone's mother would shush them. Old folks would sit in the corners, eating slowly, watching everyone with that satisfied look that comes from being part of a community. Those potlucks were about more than food, of course. They were about fellowship, about being part of something bigger than yourself. But the food was the vehicle for all that connection. The food brought us together, gave us something to talk about, something to bond over. Did you try Mrs. Patterson's mac and cheese? Best one yet. How does Mrs. Johnson get her chicken so crispy? I need Mrs. Wilson's chocolate cake recipe, but should never get it up. Food was love made visible, care made edible, community made tangible. We don't have those potlucks anymore, or at least not like we used to. Churches are smaller now, people busier, and when they do have them, half the dishes are store-bought or catered. It's not the same. It can't be. Because what made those potlucks special was the effort, the time, the knowledge that someone had spent their Saturday baking that cake or making that casserole specifically to share with their community. That doesn't happen much anymore. Let me tell you about something that might sound strange to younger folks. Liver and onions. Now I can hear you groaning, because liver has become one of those foods that everyone claims to hate. That's become a punchline, a symbol of everything that was wrong with old-fashioned cooking. But I'm here to tell you that properly cooked liver and onions was delicious, and I will die on that hill. My mother made it every other Thursday night, and while my sisters complained, I loved it. She'd get fresh beef liver from the butcher, fresh, not frozen, and properly trimmed so there was no membrane or gristle. She'd slice it thin, maybe a 1/4 inch, and soak it in milk for an hour. That's the secret no one tells you. Soaking it in milk takes away any bitter taste, makes it mild and tender. She'd dredge the liver in seasoned flour, then fry it in butter, real butter, not oil, until it was brown on the outside, but still slightly pink in the middle. Overcooked liver is like shoe leather, but properly cooked, it's tender and rich and almost creamy. While the liver was cooking, she'd fry onions in another pan, big thick slices of yellow onions, cooked low and slow, until they were soft and sweet and caramelized and golden brown. She'd serve the liver with those onions piled on top, and with mashed potatoes on the side to soak up the pan juices. The combination was incredible, rich, savory, deeply satisfying. The liver was earthy and flavorful, the onions sweet and soft, the potatoes creamy and comforting. It was peasant food, working class food, food that gave you energy and strength. But more than that, it was cheap. Liver cost almost nothing, and 1.5 pounds could feed a family of 5. My mother, like most mothers of her generation, was an expert at stretching $1 and making meals that were nutritious and filling without breaking the bank. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. And she had to be creative. Liver, heart, tongue, kidneys, all the organ meats that people turn their noses up at now. Those were regular parts of our diet, and they were good. They were nutritious, packed with iron and vitamins, and when cooked properly, they were delicious. Why don't people eat liver anymore? Why has it become this joke, this thing that represents culinary punishment? I think we've gotten too precious, too picky. We want only the easy cuts, the convenient cuts, the ones that don't require any skill or knowledge to cook. We've lost touch with the whole animal, with the idea that if you're going to kill something to eat it, you should use all of it, honor it by wasting nothing. And we've lost those flavors, those textures, those memories of our mothers standing at the stove making something nourishing out of something humble. I should talk about holiday meals, because those were the peaks of the year, the meals that we looked forward to for months, that we talked about for months afterward. Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house was legendary in her family. Grandma would start preparing days in advance. The turkey, and we're talking a 25-pound bird, because there would be 20 people at dinner, would be ordered weeks ahead from the same farmer Grandma had been buying from for decades. She'd pick it up Wednesday afternoon, bring it home, and immediately start preparing it. She had her system, her method, perfected over years of making Thanksgiving dinner. The stuffing was made first, bread cubes toasted in the oven, then mixed with sautéed celery and onions, sage and thyme from the garden, dried and saved from summer chicken stock, eggs to bind it. She'd stuff some into the turkey cavity and bake the rest in a casserole dish. The turkey would be rubbed with butter and herbs, seasoned with salt and pepper, and into the oven it would go early Thursday morning. For the next 4 or 5 hours, the house would smell like heaven. Grandma would baste it every 30 minutes, opening the oven and ladling pan drippings over the bird, keeping it moist, building that golden brown skin. The rest of the meal was a production involving every woman in the family. My mother would make the mashed potatoes, and I mean a lot of mashed potatoes, probably 10 pounds, boiled until tender, mashed with butter and cream and salt until they were smooth and fluffy. My aunt would make the green bean casserole and the sweet potato casserole with marshmallows on top. My grandmother would make the gravy, and her gravy was legendary, made from the turkey drippings, properly whisked so there were no lumps, seasoned perfectly. There'd be cranberry sauce, both the jellied kind from a can, which Grandpa insisted on because he liked how it held the shape of the can and you could slice it, and homemade cranberry relish with oranges and walnuts that was tart and sweet and crunchy. There'd be rolls, fresh baked that morning, and butter, and probably 3 or 4 other side dishes that I'm forgetting. The table would be set with Grandma's good china, The set she got for her wedding, that she used maybe 3 times a year, it would eventually be passed down through the family. There'd be a white tablecloth, cloth napkins, the good silverware, crystal glasses for water and wine. The turkey would be brought out on a platter, golden and beautiful, and Grandpa would carve it with great ceremony, giving everyone their preferred piece, white meat or dark, wing or leg. Plates would be passed and filled, and passed again until everyone had more food than they could possibly eat. Then we'd sit, all of us, 3 generations around that table, and someone would say grace, usually Grandpa, thanking God for family and health and the bounty before us, and then we'd eat. The meal would last hours. We'd eat slowly, savoring everything, talking and laughing and telling stories. Someone would get up and get seconds, then thirds. The kids would get restless and be excused to go play, coming back periodically to steal rolls or sneak bites of pie. The adults would linger at the table, nursing glasses of wine or coffee, too full to move. Eventually, Grandma would start clearing plates, and everyone would insist she sit down. They'd clean up, but she never did. She'd be in the kitchen washing dishes and putting away leftovers while the rest of us moved to the living room. And then, an hour or 2 later, when you'd think no one could possibly eat another bite, dessert would appear. Pumpkin pie, apple pie, pecan pie, maybe a mincemeat pie, if Grandma was feeling traditional. Whipped cream, real whipped cream, made from heavy cream whipped with sugar and vanilla, not from a can. Coffee strong and hot. And somehow, miraculously, everyone found room for a slice of pie, maybe 2. The day would wind down slowly, people eventually heading home with plates of leftovers, promising to see each other at Christmas, already looking forward to next Thanksgiving. Those meals don't happen much anymore. Families are too scattered, too busy. People buy pre-made dishes from the grocery store or have Thanksgiving catered. The recipes get lost or forgotten. The traditions die out, and something essential is lost with them. That sense of continuity, of being part of a chain stretching back through time, of honoring the past while creating memories for the future. Let me end by talking about something simple but profound: homemade bread. My grandmother baked bread every Saturday morning, without fail, for 60 years. She'd get up early, start the yeast proofing in warm water with a pinch of sugar, mix in flour and salt and a little butter, knead the dough for 10 minutes, and I mean really knead it, putting her whole body into it, folding and pushing and turning until the dough was smooth and elastic and alive. She'd let it rise in a warm spot, punch it down, shape it into loaves, let it rise again, then bake it until the crust was deep golden brown, and the house smelled like everything good in the world. That bread was perfect. The crust crackled when you cut into it. The interior was soft and pillowy and slightly sweet, sliced thick and spread with butter while it was still warm. It was one of the great simple pleasures of life. Toast made from that bread was in a different category from store-bought bread, more substantial, more flavorful, more satisfying. And there was always bread in Grandma's house. Always. If you stopped by, she'd make you sit down and have a slice of bread with butter and jam. It was how she showed love, how she made you feel welcome, how she took care of people. The smell of bread baking is something I can call up in my memory even now, decades later. It's the smell of home, of comfort, of a time when people had time to make bread from scratch, when that kind of effort was normal rather than extraordinary. I've tried to make bread using Grandma's recipe. She wrote it down for me before she died, knowing I'd want it, but mine never turns out quite the same. I don't have her hands, her intuition, her 60 years of practice. But I keep trying, because making that bread connects me to her, to my past, to a way of life that's mostly gone now. So why am I telling you all this? Why spend 20 minutes talking about food that most of you can't get anymore? Recipes that are lost meals that belong to the past. Because I think we've lost something important in our rush toward convenience, toward speed, toward efficiency. We've gained a lot. I'm not denying that. Food is more diverse now, more international, more interesting in many ways. But we've lost the connection that came from cooking for people you love, from sitting down together to share meals, from the rituals and traditions that gave shape and meaning to our days. Every time my mother made Sunday pot roast, every time Grandma baked bread, every time we gathered for a church potluck or a holiday meal, they were saying, "You matter. We are family. This is who we are." Food was the language of love, of care, of belonging. And I worry that we've lost fluency in that language, that younger generations don't know how to speak it because no one taught them. But here's the thing, it's not too late. Those recipes still exist, written on cards in fading handwriting, passed down through families. Those skills can still be learned. Those traditions can still be revived. You can make pot roast on Sunday. You can bake bread on Saturday morning. You can gather your family or friends for a meal and turn off the phones and just be together. It won't be exactly like it was. Nothing ever is. But it will be something real, something meaningful, something that feeds more than just your body. So I challenge you, find one of those old recipes. Call your mother or grandmother or aunt and ask them to teach you their specialty. Set aside time, real time, not rushed time, to cook something from scratch. Invite people over and make them sit at a real table and eat together. Tell stories, laugh, connect. Use food the way it was meant to be used, not just as fuel, but as a bridge between people, between generations, between past and future. Thank you for spending this time with me, for letting an old man reminisce about meals and memories. If this stirred something in you, if it made you remember your own grandmother's cooking or your own family traditions, I'd be honored if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. I've got more stories to tell, more memories to share, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Until next time, cook something real, eat something good, and share it with someone you love. That's what life's about. That's what matters. God bless you all.